I'm Harry Benjamin, and welcome to Everything Trackside.
Well, as you could probably have guessed, we've got ourselves another guest on the Everything Trackside podcast. I'm your host today. Yes, no, I'm not Irish. I know that Sean's away. He'll be on later on. Along with me today for this interview, we've got Mairead. Welcome. Hello.
Hello, how are you, Coops?
I'm doing all right. Yes, just the usual.
That's
Working, come home, interview someone. You know, it seems to be a common occurrence these past few days.
It's just how the day goes these days. It's great.
Also along with us today is Annika. How are you, Annika? You well?
Hey, yeah, I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Anytime. And as you probably could hear at the intro, we have a guest. And for anyone who listens to podcasts like myself when we're out running, you might recognise the voice. It's Harry Benjamin. How are you, Harry? Welcome along.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm all good, thank you. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
Not a problem. See, when Formula One decide to give us an impromptu 5-week break, you kind of get a bit of we can get some guests on. It's quite good. So, Harry, you are, as I've just kind of alluded to, the kind of voice of the BBC's F1 podcast. So, for anyone who doesn't really know who you are, could you give us a wee brief outline of who you are, how you came about getting to that, and we can maybe deep dive into some of the other things you've got yourself involved in.
Yeah, totally. The podcast you listen to is the BBC's F1 Checkered Flag podcast. So I basically sort of host that, or I'm sometimes a pundit, depending on how the chips fall and who the team are for the weekend. And that is a podcast that goes out every race weekend, and now actually every week. So it's the BBC's F1 podcast, so I basically host that. But that's sort of almost the companion to what we do, which is the BBC's F1 coverage. So we cover every single race, every single session for BBC Radio 5 Live in the UK, and I'm the F1 commentator for it. So practice 1, 2, and 3, a sprint, a qualifying, a Grand Prix, and it's on 5 Live or across the 5 Live network. And that also goes out on things like Sirius XM in America. So it's the radio coverage of the Formula One. So that's essentially what I do. And I've done that for just a couple of years now, actually. I sort of lose track. But I think this is my second full F1 season. I'll go with that. Yeah, I think this is my second one.
It's a nice round number. We'll go with 2. It's a nice number, isn't it? So before we go into the kind of Formula One and we kind of discuss how Formula One's going just now, let's go back to kind of the beginning. So you've not really had your path into Formula One broadcasting wasn't quite traditional, in a sense. How did it come about? What's from your beginnings to where we're at now? How did you get where you're at now, basically?
Well, how long you got? Traditional's a good word, because I don't know what is a traditional path. Because you ask anybody, commentator, broadcaster, journalist, whatever, it's never a straightforward route. And it's what I say to a lot of people. Like, I get asked now a lot, how do I do it? How did you get into it? And it's not exactly you do this, you do that, and then you get there. It's all over the shop. So, I mean, look, inherently, I was a fan of the sport when I was a kid, and I just became fascinated with watching it one day on the sofa. I'm not particularly into a load of sports. Like, I'm not really that fussed about like football or cricket or rugby or any of those kind of sports. But for some reason, a Grand Prix just completely caught my attention, and I became fascinated with sort of the politics on track and off track, and who the good drivers were and who the ones that were sort of the underdogs. And I loved supporting, an underdog and someone who would finish sixth, and that was like a win for them, and I found the whole storylines up and down the field incredible. And so from that moment, when I was maybe, I don't know, I think I must have been maybe 14 or 15, I actually started writing about it. I set up a little blog while I was at school, and I just started writing about sort of the lesser mainstream stories that people would be writing, not really thinking too much about it. And then at the same time, I actually wanted to be an actor, so I was pursuing that more at the time. So I went to drama school, went to a place called RADA in London for a year, and then I went to actually study a drama degree after that at the University of East Anglia. And it was there really that I really got more into the sort of broadcasting side and left the acting side a little bit more on the back foot, just because I loved student radio and I loved the technicalities of radio, and I love the creativeness of it. And F1 was still there. And at the time, I set up a podcast, very similar to what you guys are doing, which was me and a mate on Zoom and talking to stars from the world of motorsport or, up and comers and just interviewing them. And I was doing that. And it all basically just kept snowballing. And I was persistent in emailing people and asking for work experience. And I managed to get a foot in the door to make tea and coffee and be a general runner when I was around maybe 18. So actually just going back a bit, just before university. And when Formula E first started, I was around for when that championship first begun. And I was the T-boy essentially in an unofficial capacity. So all of that just kind of sort of mix and matching. And then as I went through university, I actually kind of I veered away from motorsport because I got a job on a commercial radio station called Hits Radio, which is, if you've not heard of it, it's a bit similar to like Capital FM or Kiss or something like that. And I did that for a weekend overnights, 1 a.m. till 6 a.m. Horrendous after a year. Yeah, that was rough. That was really rough. Sleeping on the floor of a studio, not really making any money, but it wasn't about the money at that point. It was an amazing experience. And then COVID happened. And then I had to make a choice. I quit the radio job and I was like, I want to do motorsport. And I emailed on a whim the director of TV at Formula One Management and sent him a show reel that I had cobbled together and just asking for advice. And lo and behold, he came back to me and said, have you ever done commentary? And I lied and went, yeah, sure. And next thing I know, I was having a phone call with them and a couple of producers. And then I got invited into Shadow, and then it still took about 8 months. But then 8 months later of occasionally emailing and reminding him who I was, I got the chance to be the commentator for Porsche Super Cup back in 2021, it must have been. So that was my, in sort of roundabout, short, but not really short way of describing how I got to commentary in the first place.
Interestingly, you mentioned a couple of things, acting and writing. Were those two kind of pursuits helpful now that you look back on it for where you are to help you kind of organise yourself or prepare yourself for what you're doing now?
Yeah, massively. I mean, the writing, I was writing when I was like, I didn't do it for very long. I maybe did it for like a year. So I'm not sure how much I can put on that. But it was just a good way of, I suppose, putting content out. And this was, we're talking 2012, 13 that I was doing this. So, this was kind of pre-Instagram, TikTok, where everyone's putting a reel out now. So this was my first bit of content creation. So I suppose on that side, it sort of laid a foundation. But I always say, the acting thing, that is probably one of the most relevant things for the job I do, because not only does it build up your everyday human skills and your communication skills and being able to deal with all sorts of people from all sorts of backgrounds, but it gives you confidence and it allows you to work on things like your voice and your vocal range, because that's another side that I think a lot of people forget about commentators, is that you've got to have really good control over your voice and be able to show light and shade and speed up, slow down, raise your pitch, lower it at the drop of a hat. So that was immensely useful for what I ended up doing, which is commentary, which, to be honest, was never part of the plan. Didn't really envisage becoming a commentator. Wanted to be involved in broadcasting, but I always thought commentary was too hard. It looked way too difficult. And to be honest, I still think it's quite tricky.
And also, you've got to know how to scream at the right time, according to a certain Australian commentator in Baku that year. That was an impressively well-timed scream. I think they should use that in movies now. That was brilliant.
That's authentic.
Is there any moment?
That's authenticity.
It was. Is there actually, speaking of that, is there any moments where you've came close to maybe just blurting out something as a commentator when you've seen it happen and just had to kind of bring yourself in just that wee split second?
Well, I'm sure there's moments like that have happened. I think I actually remember Brazil a couple of years ago, final lap, and it was Perez and Alonso who were literally going wheel to wheel for the entire final lap, and it was like a photo finish on the line, and the cameras cut away, right, kind of rightly so, because you have to see the winner come over the line, but we were following this battle, and it was amazing. And I think I was getting far too excited. And then when the camera cut away, because I do radio, we sort of do sometimes have a half jibe at the TV images that we're supplied. So, there is a bit of, oh, come on, what do you do? And then you have to sort of quickly, no, that's the fan coming out. Hold on. What a finish, that kind of thing, and then bring yourself back. But there's tons of moments like that.
You've commentated now across pretty much all the feeders as well as Formula One. Has that helped you in preparing for like the big stage that is Formula One to work along the other series?
Massively, yeah. I mean, I did Porsche Supercar. I did a thing called International GT Open. I did Euro Formula Open. I even did a thing called like the Alpine Europa Cup. I've done Ferrari Challenge. So I've done like sports cars and tin tops, and then I've done Ginettas included in that. And then F3 I did for a year and a bit. And then I did the first ever season of F1 Academy when it sort of wasn't live. And then I've done a couple of F2. Didn't do that much F2 actually, but yeah, all of that was massively helpful, especially sort of the Porsches and the F3s, because it gets you into sort of the F1 mind space, and it's all operated by Formula One management. So it's all the same people that are working on the F1 TV coverage that are also working on F2, F3 and Porsche. So it gets you in the building for a start. And it gets you up to speed with dealing with talkback, people talking in your ear while you're also commentating, or suddenly having a load of screens and data available to you. Because I could watch a race at home, and like many people do, you have your thoughts and you're reading the race, but it's actually so different when you're in a commentary box, and it's quite intimidating because you know that there are people listening to you, and not only through the TV but also in the production and the gallery, and you've got to deal with countdowns and making sure you're saying hello and welcome and goodbye exactly as they're counting you down from 10, 9, 8, 7, and you've got to talk at the same time. And all the stuff that happens during a race, if they're going to roll in a replay or they're going to cut to turn 14 or whatever it might be. It's just a whole different kind of thing to get used to on a technical side. So massively useful, as well as just building up air miles as a commentator. Like they say that for pilots all the time, don't you? You've got to get your air miles. It's exactly the same, I think, in commentary. The consequences are probably less, but you've just, the more you do, the better you get. And the more race scenarios that are chucked at you, the different categories, the different formats, the better you get at commentating and reading a race.
Did you ever have put pressure on yourself trying to think of a catchphrase? Because everyone seems to have a catchphrase for the start. Crofty has his catchphrase. Did you ever think, what do I do to start it?
Yeah, absolutely. It was one of the first things I thought of. I remember being out. It must have been COVID. I guess there was on a distanced dog walk or something with one of my mates, Charlie, and I was like, I gotta come up with a line. What am I going to say? All the good ones are taken, and it's really difficult. So I came up with I say it's all eyes to the lights and foot to the floor, and we go racing, blah blah blah, or various iterations of that. And look, is it the best one out there? Probably not, but I'm sticking with it. And to be honest, mainly the reason you have a line or a catchphrase is to buy you time, because so much is happening at the start of a race that the tension's building, the lights are going out. You got now 22 cars all moving within a split second. Your mouth can't keep up with your eyes. So if you know, or if Crofty knows, or whoever it is, that you've got, you see the lights, you've got your phrase, that just allows you a couple of seconds to just let your mouth catch up to what you're seeing, and buys you time to sort of commentate those first couple of corners. So I do have a line, and that's what I use.
And you're now stuck with it, so you can't change it, because if you did change it, social would probably get in touch. Social media would be like, you're not allowed to change things now.
No, exactly. I've even trademarked it as well. Got in there like Crofty did. So I'm stuck with it now.
Is he trademarked it, has he?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
So in terms of commentary itself, how much preparation goes into a kind of Formula One commentator's weekend for yourself, at least, anyway?
Yeah, loads. I mean, I sort of split it up into segments really, because you're building up towards the race. So if I'm traveling to a race, actually it's harder because you don't have as much time because you've got to factor in all the travel stuff. So I go to about 10 or 11 races, and the rest I do remotely from a studio in London. So if I'm on site, from the Monday or Tuesday, I'll be doing my kind of baseline notes, which is sort of essentially printing off all the stuff that I normally have that just gets added to after each race, the results, the standings, how many races they've done, how many points they've scored, all that kind of stuff, Grand Prix victories, blah, 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 all that, just adding that up. And I've got that written out in nice little sort of colourful charts, things like that I can stick up on the wall and just glance at and see if I need a reminder. So I'll be printing all that. Then I have my main bit, which is my track map, and I have two sides of A4 back to back. One is with the teams and one is with all the drivers on it. And that essentially is just any interesting stats, any sort of news, top line news stories that I want to just write down and remember so I can glance at it and go, oh, yeah, I want to bring that up now. Or they're just a reminder of how old they are when they were born, all that kind of stuff, where they're from, or where they were born rather than their actual nationality. But so that's there. And then my track map is, all the interesting things about the corners. They've got names, maybe why they're called that, various stats, things like how many times has pole position converts it to a win, all that kind of stuff. So I'll be gathering all that in the kind of Monday, Tuesday, probably a bit of Wednesday as well as keeping up with all the latest news that's just rolling in, whether that's listening to other people's podcasts or chatting to teams or people I've met over the years, just to kind of get an insight into sort of the various atmospheres within different teams. And then Thursday, once you get to the track, that's media day. So normally we'll get there fairly early. And that basically involves setting up the commentary box. So my producer, Paddy, will rig the commentary box. If I'm there with BBC Radio 5 Live, it was such a different operation to what you might think like Sky Sports are or a TV production are. We're a team of maybe 5 or 6 people, whereas the TV guys, we're talking hundreds. And we have a tiny commentary box, which is, my producer Paddy will set up. He's the engineer and he's the producer, so he'll set all that up. Meanwhile, I'll go off and we might have teed up an interview. So for instance, in Miami coming up, we'll be talking to Arvid Lindblad, which is a kind of recurring series that we're doing throughout the year. So Racing Bulls will give me a time, and it's probably outside the hospitality. So I'll go to him. We'll set up 15-minute chat with Arvid Lindblad. So I'll think about that, prepare for that. There's the driver press conference, which I might go and sit in if it's particularly interesting, or I might watch it from the media center if I don't actually have anything useful to add, because most people ask the questions that you want to ask anyway. And then that's essentially, your time to do media interviews. And then we'll do a preview show. So we'll do the preview podcast on the Checkered Flag feed, and we'll do any social kind of stuff. And then basically you're into it. And so your prep then becomes, what happened in practice, what happened in qualifying. And then you're just constantly building up knowledge throughout the weekend. And so you're always kind of constantly revising, and then you just drop it all Sunday night. And for me, it all goes out my brain and I'll forget about it until the next race. So that's kind of what it is. And then it's very similar on site, when you're off site, except I might just start prepping a little later in the week because I've got more time on my hands, basically.
Is there anything that a fan might not realise that you have to focus on when you're in the commentary box? Because we only hear what you say, but when you're in the commentary box, is there anything that you kind of have to keep an eye on that we wouldn't necessarily know?
Other people in the commentary box trying to, I have normally a co-commentator, or Andrew Benson, who's the BBC's F1 correspondent, also sits in with us. Andrew might be flailing his hand at something, wanting to point something out, and that'll distract me. So that's something to have to get used to. But that's just that's for everybody. I think the main thing is you have loads of data screens that you're constantly looking at. So I've got to be watching the main output, which is exactly what you all get at home. But I've also got the ability to look at timing screens and data and tyre monitors and things like that. But I can't look at them for too long because I can't miss something that's happened on the track. So it's a tricky balancing act of looking at other screens whilst also talking at the same time. Equally, it comes back to what I was saying about sort of the production element of things. So a lot of the times on 5 Live, the way we do things, obviously you've got to be a lot more descriptive for the radio and talk constantly rather than what they might do on TV. But on 5 Live, we sometimes might be on BBC Radio 5 Live on a Sunday, which is the main network. And I effectively will become also the host of 5 Live. So we could get to lap 7 of the Monaco Grand Prix, and suddenly I'll have to go, right, but it's a big weekend of Premier League action coming up and the team sheets are in. Let's head over to Anfield now and cross over to John Smith with the latest blah, blah, blah. And then I'll have to stop commentating and let John Smith do his update for 30 seconds, which when I first started was like the most bizarre thing, because I'm like, well, but there's lap 7's happening. It's going to go to lap 8. Like, I still need to watch this, but I've also got to listen to whatever John Smith is barking on about, because if he says something, if he throws me a line and I just ignored it, then it's just bad broadcasting. So that's one thing that people might not realize. But also on the flip side, there's lots of other stations that make up the 5 Live network. So we might, more often than not, we're on Sports Extra or Sports Extra 2. And so I'll be John Smith. So suddenly I'll be commentating and I'll be going lap 7, Fernando Alonso's going for a dive down the inside or whatever. And suddenly I'll get a thing called Q in my ear. And I'll get a bit of pre-warning that this is coming from my producer, who will talk to me in my ear. And he'll say, 5 Q coming, expect it in the next 2 to 3 minutes. And then suddenly I'll get Q, and Q is basically the sound of 5 Live. So whoever is talking on 5 Live at that time. So it might be someone like Mark Chapman, who's a renowned BBC Sports broadcaster. And he'll be throwing around to all the various sports, and he'll be going, right, well, thanks, John Hunt, for the horse racing update. And I'll catch the end of that, and I'll have to hear it whilst I'm also commentating at the same time, because people who are listening to me on Sports Extra can't hear Mark Chapman on 5 Live. So I've got to somehow kind of tidy all this up and wrap it up in a nice little bow and talk for Sports Extra like nothing's happening, but also not miss Mark Chapman then going, right, that's the horse racing. Thanks, John Hunt. Now it's lap 7 of the Monaco Grand Prix over on Sports Extra, Harry Benjamin. And I'll have to listen to that, pause what I'm saying, but not do it in an abrupt manner so it sounds weird for Sports Extra, and then go and then give an update. So in an ideal world, I go, Fernando Alonso dives down the inside and the move doesn't come off, and then stop, and then I'll pick up straight away because that's timed nicely with the throw from Mark Chapman. And I'll then say, yeah, it is, but it's lap 8 now of the Monaco Grand Prix. Fernando Alonso is probably the one making all the moves. He's made up 10 positions so far. It's unfathomable to think about that. But it's Lewis Hamilton who leads from blah, 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 blah. And then that'll be it. And then I'll pause. I'll hear Mark go, thanks, Harry. And you can listen in full on Sports Extra. That will then fade out, and I'll pick up as if nothing ever happened for the Sports Extra listener. So forgive me if that's a bit overcomplicated, but that is something that I don't think many people realise when you might be listening to 5 Live and our F1 coverage.
It does sound a lot more complicated than I thought it was, to be fair. Annika, I think has got a few questions to ask next.
Go for it.
Yeah, of course. So obviously during COVID and when Drive to Survive made a big entrance into Netflix and brought a lot of new fans to the sport, many might not know, but you were involved with Drive to Survive as well. How was that for you, and how was that different from doing live commentary?
Yeah. So I've been involved with Drive to Survive for the last couple of years, and it's almost like a bit of a supplementary role. I think you're just sort of helping tell the storylines a bit more, and you're providing context, and you're also just trying to help them tell the story as accurately as possible. And look, Drive to Survive is a snapshot of what Formula One is. We all know that. Mm-hmm. It's not aimed at the core fan base. It's aimed at the casual viewer, and if it translates some people into core fans, then brilliant. If it doesn't, then it's there to give those who want it their F1 dose. So it's an honor. It was an honor to be a part of it. It's cool to sort of have a Netflix credit, and the guys that run it are great, and to even have a bit of a say in sometimes the way things are edited, because I'll be watching, I get a sneak peek of some of the stuff that's happening, and I'll notice that, well, hang on, that doesn't quite make sense because that didn't happen in that order. They would have mucked up the editing slightly. And the pit stop, I'm like, well, no, he'd already pitted, so that's not an overtake. And actually that happened 3 laps or whatever. And then we'll work together to help shape it out, and then, you know, they'll gloss it up or whatever. But so that's really fun and interesting. But I think the Drive to Survive effect has been obviously incredible. I think it is a brilliant asset for the sport, regardless of what others might think. The one thing that they told me, which I found fascinating, was America is obviously their biggest market, and they will have, you know, American fans, young fans predominantly, who won't watch F1 at all really during the season. And to find out what happened, they will literally watch and binge watch all 8 to 10 episodes of Drive to Survive, and that'll be how they absorb Formula One. And then they'll wait a year until they see what happened in the next season, which I find mental. But also, you know what? I mean, it's there. It's a way of digesting F1 for an audience that otherwise wouldn't watch it at all, which as a fan, I just want as many people to watch F1 as possible, regardless of the format it comes in. So I think Drive to Survive is brilliant. And so it's quite cool to be a part of.
That's brilliant. Yeah, good to get some insight in that, because I actually got back into F1 I watched the Senna documentary, and then I had the bug, so I started watching Schumacher's documentary. And then I watched Drive to Survive, like I binged it up until the 2025 season, and 2025 was my first full season after years and years, because I watched it as a kid. So it was really cool, like, you know, seeing all these kind of things and then actually getting into the sport. So you're right, it is a gateway for new fans, and like hopefully there's more like me who actually like you watch it and then start watching the whole season. So yeah, that's brilliant. Thanks so much for being part of it. Yeah. Well, obviously F1 has grown massively in recent years. Like there's new fans all over. From your perspective, inside the media, like as a broadcaster, what's been the biggest shift in it, and how the sport is presented?
What's been the biggest shift? Well, I think there's just a lot more content that has to be put out there, and there's a lot more ways to do it. There's obviously, I sort of grew up wanting to be a sort of traditional broadcaster, which was, you know, linear television, Sky Sports F1, you know, BBC One, whatever it was. You know, I wanted to be on that, and I didn't even think about YouTube or you know, Instagram or TikTok or anything like that, or streaming players and things like that, which weren't even around then. So that can't be the case anymore, because like these linear channels just can't survive. There's not enough money. So you have to adapt. And I think what we've seen is with the influx of, you know, Netflix and Apple and people like that, I think it's brilliant for the sport, and it helps everybody really involved, because it elevates everyone's game. But it just means that you have to be more, you've got to think more sort of 360 degree about it. Like you can't just put something out on one sort of format. You've got to also template it for a TikTok video, or even for me as a commentator, you know, I'm now not just a commentator. I'm a commentator and a sort of content creator as well, because that's massively useful for me and my brand, as cringy as that is to say. But that's a massive element that I use to help me in the media landscape. And it's the same as what I think these big broadcasters are doing. I think it's really interesting. Apple TV have come in on the US side, and I'm really excited to see what they do once they sort of put their own spin on their coverage. One of the biggest things I think I saw this year was that they've done a deal with Netflix, which is Netflix are going to be able to show the Canadian Grand Prix on Netflix. And in return, Apple TV Apple TV users will be able to watch Drive to Survive. And I think that's incredible, because Netflix has the Drive to Survive audience, and this is a natural sort of follow through. They want to watch a full F1 race, but Netflix didn't win the rights. However, they've not neither team have buried their head, which I think is brilliant. So everyone's open to collaboration and flexibility, as long as everyone's getting a benefit out of it. And Apple obviously now have the F1 rights, but they might not necessarily have the F1 audience. So if they can convert some people through watching Drive to Survive, which we know is massive in the US, everyone's a bit of a winner here. And so I think we'll see more and more things like that happening. I look at it as well from where I'm at doing the radio. People think, you think of radio and you might think that's super old school. Who the hell listens to that? We get massive numbers still, but our audience is different. But also we're changing the way we do things now. Our podcast now is visual. We film it like it's in a TV studio. It's a TV studio setup, and everything has to be, we've got to put out 3 clips of commentary camera or visualized podcast or whatever it might be, or can we do this on site, or can we do this at a team factory or whatever, because that's what you've got to be able to provide now, as well as the baseline coverage. You've got to be able to sort of convert it into something palatable for different audiences too. So it's not easy, and it's a tough ask for everyone involved, but I think it's fascinating the way it's evolved in a very short space of time. I couldn't tell you where it's going to go because I'm not that smart. So I'll have to sort of ride the wave and try and cling on to wherever it goes. But I think it's a really interesting place to be. And I actually really hope places like Apple really succeed sort of in the US, because I think ultimately that's for the benefit of everybody who loves the sport.
Yeah, no, totally agree with that. We see new type of content coming out constantly, and everyone are putting their own spin to it. So just traditional ways you just need to try and keep up. But you were also part of the F1 Kids broadcast, which was completely different, isn't it? And how was that? What did you learn from that experience, and how was working with the young aspiring broadcasters?
Yeah, I did the first ever one of F1 Kids when they had the budget, and it was a tie up with Sky and Formula One themselves. So it was quite daunting for me actually, because that was my first kind of foot in the door with Sky Sports. And I kind of half saw it, if I'm honest, as a bit of an audition. I wasn't really sure what for, but I thought I can't muck this up, even though it's a very different type of broadcast. It was really cool. It was great fun to be a part of. The team were amazing. The kids were insanely talented for being, between the ages of 8 and 12 or something. They were more, Braden, who was the oldest kid, he had more experience in TV than I did. So I was like, you're better than me, mate. And then Zach was brilliant. He was such a motorsport guy. He was a karter. He was so keen to just do everything. He wanted to just be involved. He was so up for it. And then you had Scarlett, who is just she knows what she's doing. She's great sort of with her voice, and she knows what questions to ask. She's got an eye for good content. So these kids were amazing, and they had better access than I think some of the adult broadcasters could ever hope to get. So I think from that perspective, it was brilliant. But it was great for me because I didn't actually have to do that much, because the whole point was the kids were commentating, and I was just kind of there to guide them through it. But, I sat down with the kids beforehand and we did sort of mock commentaries, because I don't think we did anything until qualifying, or maybe even we might have even only done the race. Can't remember. But we did do like a practice session as if it was live. But the race was the big one, and we had all these amazing graphics. And we had these amazing co-commentators come in and chat with the kids. So, we had Nico Rosberg, Danica Patrick, Stefano Domenicali came in.
Wow.
And it was, the kids were in awe. I was a bit in awe because I'd never worked with these guys either. So I sort of was masquerading as this sort of experienced broadcaster when I really wasn't that much more experienced than the 11-year-old kid next to me, except I'd done a few more F1 commentaries. But it was such a cool experience. I loved it. I really hoped they would have done more. I know they do now, but it's a very different setup from Biggin Hill, and it's an F1 production now. But I think it's still great that it's there as an opportunity, because I think the thing that I'll be honest, I've not watched it in a while, but I think they've got to figure out who are they actually aiming it at? Like how old are the kids that they're aiming it at? Because for super young kids, it's great because there's lots of bright colors and things are moving and you're talking sort of enthusiastically in a slightly different way. But if I take the ages of the kids that I was doing it with, so between 8 and 11 and 12 or whatever, those kids probably aren't going to watch that broadcast because they want to watch the adult broadcast, because at that age, and as you get older, you want to be taken seriously, don't you? I'm an adult now. So that's, I think, the tricky crossover they've got. But I think it's still going, and I think it's a great offer to put out there. And why not? When you've got the means and the opportunity to do it. Absolutely. So I'd love to come back and sort of do it again. It'd be cool to sort of see where it's come, but how far it's come. But yeah, that was a great experience. I was deathly ill over the entire weekend in Budapest. It was. So I was sort of also trying to just get through it too and not cock it up too much and show to the Sky Sports bosses that I was like half decent, which I think hopefully worked. So yeah, it was a good weekend. I think that was a couple of years ago now. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think any of the kids that you worked with will be a future broadcaster in F1?
I think Zach is very much on his way to doing that. Braden is already a broadcaster, but I think he loves F1, but I think his sport is probably football. And he does a lot of that stuff anyway. Scarlett, the girl, I've just seen Scarlett has been cast in the new Harry Potter HBO series. So I think she'll probably be back in F1, but she'll probably be one of those VIP actors on the grid rather than being in the commentary box.
Probably, yeah.
So I think they're all doing all right. And I actually bumped into Zach and Scarlett at an event a year ago, and suddenly Zach was about 4'0" when I first met him, and he's massively shot up. So it was sort of like a sort of proud dad moment. But he's I think he still karts, and he will. I'm sure he will end up being involved in Formula One as a broadcaster at some point.
I hope so. What do you think? How important it is for F1 to keep evolving? How they talk with the new audience, especially younger fans.
I think it is important, but I suppose they've got to find this balancing act, right? It's what we talk about now with the sort of the new regulations, isn't it? And you've got to appeal to the younger generation because they're the ones that are going to be watching, hopefully, for the next 20, 30, 40 years. But you can't alienate the older existing audience either, because they are your core audience, and you've got to try and find some sort of balance there, I think, and that's really, really difficult. But that's why I think if you've got these kind of almost like alternative broadcasts going on, you see Sky F1 bringing in lots of different talent, younger talent. I think they're doing a competition at the moment to find a content creator to join their team. I think that's genius, because they're the people that are going to speak to the younger audience. There'll be a bit of crossover with the core, and I think the idea is they get a bit of crossover onto sort of the mainstream broadcast as well. But their job, I think, will be mainly on sort of Sky Sports socials or whatever. But that's brilliant. Or you look at, I think what we're doing at 5 Live, we're now working with Izzy Hammond, who is Richard Hammond's daughter, who is very much a Drive to Survive fan and sees it through those eyes, whereas I don't. So actually, it's quite interesting we interviewed Aya Komatsu the other day, and I was just quite interested to know, well, what would you ask, Izzy? Because I know what I would ask, but sometimes you sort of can get lost a little bit in the F1 bubble and not realize, hang on, well, what's the broader appeal here? Is there a really basic question that actually we're all just missing? And I think if you can combine the two, then you're onto a winner. You see it with the new Naomi Schiff, Will Buxton, David Coulthard podcast. They brought in a girl called Jolie Sharp, whose expertise is very much social media and Gen Z trends and all this kind of stuff. So you're seeing more and more of these kind of clashes and crossovers. Some will work, some won't. A lot of people will absolutely hate it, and a lot of people will absolutely love it. A lot of people won't think about it twice. But that's always been the case, I think, no matter what broadcast type comes in over the years. So I think it's just about bringing it in and fine tuning. And I think that's what we will see more of, because at the end of the day, you want to appeal to as wider audience as possible. And how do you do that? Well, you've got to get the different people in. You've got to look at the different types of content you offer. And I think for Formula One, everyone wants insider access, don't they? Everyone wants to see behind the scenes. And so as long as you are still delivering that remit of authoritative broadcasting with insider knowledge and giving a bit of fun behind the scenes content, then crossing over into that, Gen Z or whatever it is, whatever generation we're on now, then I think you're onto a winner. So that's how I sort of view the sort of ever-changing landscape of it.
The paddock gates are like Disneyland gates to most fans here, where it's the dream to get behind those gates. And I think actually the content creators coming into the paddock are giving us nearly more access to that world and even bringing us along on the dream themselves. So I actually kind of agree with you that it is good to kind of have them involved in it as well. You're in the paddock a lot of the time. What is it like inside there? Is it all a mirage? Are we all dreaming? Or is there any behind the scenes? What's it like behind the scenes?
I mean, look, the first time I went in, yeah, it's super cool. Some paddocks are better than others as well. There's definitely a ranking system. But you walk in and you hear those beeps on the turnstiles, and then suddenly you are in this other world, and you look at these amazing hospitality units that get sprung up within hours, and you're just casually seeing, could be Pierre Gasly having a coffee on the veranda, or, Lewis Hamilton's, Lewis Hamilton's around because normally he's surrounded by a bunch of people walking down the paddock. So you're just seeing all these sort of faces that you've seen on the telly who are just stood around and walking and talking and acting kind of normal. I found it very odd personally to see, like, when I first walked in, to see like the Sky TV team in action, because I grew up watching Sky Sports. So I was like, oh my God, there's Simon Lazenby. Oh my God, that's Natalie Pinkham. Not to mention the first time I sat in a production office with them, that was a whole moment. But it is a cool experience, but it's not, it's not, I'd say Disneyland is probably better, but but it is cool, and it is a great place to see. There's a lot of places you're not allowed to go. My media pass will only get me so far. You can go inside the motorhomes, which is quite cool and interesting, but they're quite small and cramped normally. You don't really get to go inside the garages unless you are invited, because also this is a working space. You've got mechanics, you've got people pushing tires. You've got to get out of their way, so you can't sort of hold them up. And sometimes, if hospitality is busy, there is a bit of a, invited guests only kind of thing going on. But, most sort of people are lovely, and they'll, if you need a cup of tea or you need a water, they'll let you just come in and grab a glass of water or a carton of water or whatever from their fridge. So that's really cool. And it's a great place to sort of soak up the atmosphere, and it's great people watching. If you want to go people watching, do it in the paddock, because it's absolutely fascinating. So it is a really cool experience. I spend most of my time not in the paddock, to be honest. I go in and I come out again. I'm either in the commentary box, the media room, or the TV compound. And those three things are the most unglamorous things you could possibly imagine. Your living room is probably nicer. So I should take that back about some of the media rooms. Some of the media rooms are very nice. Again, there's a ranking system. But the TV compound is normally miles away, and it's a bunch of sort of porter cabins that you've all got to squeeze into with a couple of fridges and a kettle or something like that. So it's sort of like a building site, essentially, a working building site. So there's a glamorous side and there's a not so glamorous side.
We'll pretend it's all glamorous. The illusion. Yeah. We'll keep the illusion going. You said
sorry, I wasn't being a very good influencer there.
You said there that obviously Sky Sports, you watched Sky Sports growing up, and it was probably like a pinch me moment as such, being able to work with them. And to work as basically in David Croft's position for a couple of weekends as well. From listening to you earlier, it actually sounds like the radio is harder to run than the talking on the television. Did you feel more pressure going into the Sky Sports television, because obviously you'd looked up to this your whole life? Did you feel the pressure, or did you find radio is actually harder?
No, I felt the pressure massively. My first race for Sky, Imola, 2 years ago. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. It was just horrendous. And everyone was telling me, "Oh, enjoy it. You got to make sure you enjoy it." And I was like, "I can't enjoy it. I'll enjoy it once it's done." And because suddenly, look, Five Live, I love Five Live, but also I've done it. I've done it for a couple of years now. I'm in the groove of it. I do it week in, week out. I know everybody. I know how it all works, so I can do it in my sleep. It wasn't like that when I first started, but now it's clockwork. But by the time, I suddenly felt like I'd gone back 2 years. It's like starting a new job, or it's like the first day at school suddenly, except everybody knows who you are now. You're getting slagged off in your DMs by people who have no idea who you are, and you've not even said a word yet. So it's and you're also working alongside these massive names that you've grown up watching on the TV, like your Natalie Pinkham, Simon Lazenby, but also I think I was paired with Karun that weekend, or Ant Davidson, or even meeting Nico Rosberg, who I was a Rosberg fan. Shouldn't say that out loud, but I was. But that was mental, and just to compute all of that, as well as then having to deliver a commentary which was totally different to what I would do for 5 Live. Yes, I do every single session. And essentially, when you boil it down, you're commentating over TV pictures. It shouldn't be that hard. It shouldn't be that different. But it was, because you have different protocols going on. On the radio, we ignore all of the graphics. We don't do we don't play the F1 theme tune. We don't look at the, when they do the grid graphic at the start and they're pointing out the corners. Like we completely ignore it. Don't even acknowledge it. And we're doing our own broadcast. So suddenly I've got to then switch and go and sort of remember that, because that's very similar to what I was doing in F3. I've got to remember, oh no, there's a format here, and I've got 30 seconds until the next page comes up and all this kind of stuff, and I've got to hit that. Same with the grid. I remember on Sunday, I completely forgot that the grid now runs backwards. And I was like, oh God. So I was ready to go in on pole position. And on 20th on the grid, it's Lance Stroll or whatever. And suddenly then having to work backwards. And I was like, shit. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't swear. Pardon my language. Thankfully, I didn't do that on Sky. And then, so there's all of that. And then there's also commentary for TV is different to radio. You don't have to be as descriptive, which is something I still struggle with, to be honest, because I'm so ingrained in doing it. And I only do 3 Sky Sports a year. So it's quite hard to just sort of jump in and then sort of build up again, because it's all about, it's all about experience, and it's all about the flow and working with the same people over and over again and building up those relationships from the people that I'm on air with to the people that are producing me. They're all brand new people. And I was probably a bit more meek and mild than I usually am. And so it's a whole new world, and you're feeling the pressure. Thankfully, it got through that weekend fine. And I did 3 that year, and I did 3 last year. I've not been happy to this day to a race that I've actually done for them, but I will get there. But I'm doing some more this year. So actually, I should have been doing one as we record this weekend, sadly, but should have been in Saudi Arabia, but it's taken away. But there are bigger things going on in the world. So I'll pop up in Barcelona and Zandvoort at my Sky races this year. So that'll be fun. And I already feel a lot more confident about them. I know the Sky team way better. I'm doing some other stuff with them as well. So it is all about confidence and experience at the end of the day. But it was a massive change to doing the radio. And I was actually after the first one, I was quite relieved to go back to the radio, because I was like, oh, okay, I can breathe now. Trevor is not messaging me saying I'm crap or something like that. So happy days.
We thought you did a brilliant job on Sky Sports. So
Thank
well
you.
done to you, for sure.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Is there a standout race in your career where you thought, I'd love to go back and commentate on that race again, just for the sheer buzz of it?
Oh, good question. I mean, actually, so one I have previously commentated on was it was Singapore. I always forget the year, 2023 it must have been, where Carlos Sainz won. And he had the DRS trick, keeping Lando in, and George Russell crashed on the final lap. Because just Russell going into the wall on the final lap. Whoa! Like, just to kind of relive that kind of whole scenario and the intensity of it, incredible. I actually think I'd probably go back and do a race that I've never done. I'm sort of, for some reason, obsessed by the 2012 F1 season. I think that's because that's sort of what I grew up. That's when I really got into Formula One. So I would love to go back to the final race of that year, which was Brazil 2012. I mean, because Brazil should be the final race of the calendar, in my opinion. But secondly, it had everything. It had a championship battle on the line between Fernando Alonso and Sebastian Vettel, Ferrari versus Red Bull. You had Michael Schumacher lining up for his last Grand Prix. And then you had the weather coming into it as well. And you had Vettel being spun round at turn 4 on the opening lap, taking damage, somehow still in the race, and then carving his way back. He had to finish 6th, and Alonso was going to win the championship if he was 7th or less. And then I think on the last couple of laps, he got 6th. And I was like, that was everything I loved within Formula One. And I would love to have been like a part of that at the time. So I'd probably pick 2012 Brazil.
It sounds even exciting now as you talk about it. You just kind of,
if you've not watched it, go back and watch it.
It's so good. And the way you just commented there, you're like, you get the buzz off it automatically. And obviously commentary is so fast paced. Like you said, things change really, really quickly in a race. Has there ever been a time where something has popped up and you had to suddenly change really quickly, or something went terribly wrong and you had to try and quickly rewind, basically?
What, as in, like, if I've made a mistake or if something sort of happened,
or
I've got to
something
change
happened on
tone?
track? Either, really. Like, yeah.
I mean, obviously, whenever there's a huge crash, you've got to, if it's ever unclear, that is panic stations, and you've got to remain calm, and you can't sort of. Zhou Guanyu, British Grand Prix 2022.
Yeah.
I want to say.
Yeah.
Obviously, huge shunts, turn one, upside down in the barriers. I was quite proud of myself because that was only my second ever F1 commentary at the time. And I was doing it for 5 Live. And back then I was doing just 3 a year for 5 Live. And that was my second ever one. And I called it with Zhou Guanyu straight away. So I was quite proud of that. But secondly, you're not seeing who it is straight away. Red flag is out. You can't see the car. They're not showing it. You're seeing George Russell stopped and running over. And you're getting glimpses of information. Like there's a public announcer who works at FOM who basically feeds all the broadcasters information in scenarios like this, and so they're talking down the line to my producer and all the other producers and saying, we don't know if he's okay at the moment, stand by or whatever. So then my producer's relaying that, being like, we don't know his status, we'll just keep filling, just keep talking. And then it's my job to just keep talking along with my co-commentator, who was Jolyon Palmer at the time. And you at that point you've worked out who it is, and you will try and analyze bits of the crash, but they're not showing you replays of it until they know he's okay. And so you have to be really careful with your words and not say anything that could worry anyone, because you never know, his family could be listening or whatever. So you've really got a duty of care at that point. So that is a moment, I think, where it was really sort of sticky and quite a learning process for me. And we managed it fine. And then Zhou Guanyu's out of the car, all clear, happy days. He's great. You can analyze the crash. And because on the BBC, we're not we can be a bit more critical, I think, of the broadcast and of Formula One and in general. So because we're sort of independent, so we can actually have a debate about, well, the car should have never been able to get that far, or the roll hoop didn't absorb the impact enough, change needs to be made, blah, blah, blah. So then we can get into that, and then you start to build up again, and then you get the race restart. So yeah, that's probably an early one where I really had to change up the tone.
Yeah, I was in Farm Curve for that one and saw the car just going past. I'll never forget it. You really rely on the commentators to even reassure you in the stands. The commentators at the track, I have to say, were brilliant that day as well. But I was even texting home because they didn't have the information. So wondering, did BBC or Sky have any information? Because at the track, you don't get the information at the same time as well. So really respect the job of a commentator in those circumstances in particular, because that is not an easy thing to do at all. So fair play to you. What has been the toughest thing about your job, maybe that fans don't understand?
Oh, the toughest thing about the job. If there's a really boring race and you've got to talk through it for 2 hours, that's a bit tough. Because you can't say it's boring. Well, you can, but you've got to find the storylines. So if the closest battle is 14th and 15th, then that's what you're getting, I'm afraid. So that's probably a tougher scenario. But I think, you know what? I think, I think commentary is hard. I think a lot of people think they can do it, and they might well be able to. But until you actually are there in the booth with the cans on, with the cars there, the people talking to you, the monitors in front of you, I don't think everybody can do it. And I've got to think that because it's my job. But I also think that it's not rocket science or obviously brain surgery, but it is a tricky job. And I obviously know Crofty, and because he's in the most high profile position, he gets a lot of love, but he gets a lot of hate. And I experienced that when I did my Sky role. Got a lot of love, got a lot of hate as well. And you've really got to build up a resilience to that. And it's tricky. You literally have random people DMing you horrible, horrible things. Or even I came across it. I'm a Gen Z commentator or whatever. I scroll TikTok. I use TikTok. I'm scrolling. I'm seeing these videos and podcasts of people slagging off commentators and things like that. So it's just this weird sort of like dynamic personally that I'm building where I'm very much up to speed on the world of social media and content, but I'm also sometimes in that limelight where I can be critiqued. You know, if you do badly in your job, it's not there for everybody to see, and you're not being sort of hauled over the coals for it for weeks on end. Whereas you are if you're a commentator, and it does sometimes feel like the end of the world when you get something wrong. So that's probably the toughest thing, is actually having the mentality to deal with that.
I think the goal, I think, is having your wee mistakes to turn into iconic moments like your Murrayisms, because they were just, if you just turn them to be part of the lexicon, then it wasn't a mistake. You meant it from the start.
Well, yeah, no, exactly that. I mean, Murray Walker is famed for his mistakes, like he's like, you know, but that doesn't happen in the modern day. So you know, so it's, and it comes sort of maybe full circle to what we were talking about. You know, why there's a much bigger fan base now, more people watch it, there's more content to be delivered. You can't hide, and anyone can make content, and anyone can pick up a phone and say anything, really, or type anything, or do anything. So you didn't have that in Murray Walker's day. And at Murray Walker, he kind of knew what he was doing, and he absolutely lent into that. But they were still organic mistakes that he was making. So it's a weird complex. But then again, Murray had way less information than we get. But also, I actually think we get loads of information, and I think that can sometimes be a detriment, to be honest, because sometimes too much information complicates things and shrouds things and gets you all tied up and in a mess. Whereas sometimes just say what you see can be the easiest and best way of commentating.
Just before we kind of finish up, we've got a wee couple of quick fire questions. But the first one I want to ask is, have you watched Project Hail Mary? Question.
I have not. No. Sorry, I haven't.
Dear. Anyway, that's because that's trending, so I thought I'd put that in there just now.
Oh no, I've done everything I've ever said. That's tonight's job. You've caught me a day early.
Anyway, I can thoroughly recommend the film. If you've seen The Martian, you'll really like this film.
I do love a bit of sort of sci-fi kind of sort of stuff,
or
like kind of that kind of vibes. Yeah, I do like a bit of that. Yeah, no, I like a bit of that, so I think I'll enjoy it.
Definitely will. So we'll go into some quick fire questions just to kind of round everything off. So answer the first that comes out to your head. Favourite track on the calendar?
Suzuka.
Best race you've ever commentated on?
Australia 2022, because that was my first race.
Driver you enjoy watching the most right now?
Lewis Hamilton.
He's got his fight back, hasn't he? Right now.
Yeah, it's just nice. Look, it's nice to see sort of the fire lit again. Yeah.
I really want him to win. Really, just to win.
I think it'll happen. I think he will win a race this year. I think he will.
Most underrated driver on the grid?
Oh, underrated. Maybe someone like an Alex Albon.
I kind of...
Interesting.
Interesting, yeah.
What, do you think he is highly rated, or you don't rate him?
I agree with you, Terry.
Or he's rated appropriately?
No, he's rated better. I mean, he's done the one thing that a lot of drivers fail to do, which is come out of the Red Bull meat grinder and actually have a career afterwards, and a good one, which just kudos to. But in terms of underrated, I'm probably down the route of kind of Bortoleto. I think he's kind of
good shout. Yeah,
for me. Not to say that I don't think Albon will do something well or keep going where he's going. There's something about Bortoleto that I agree. I think he's going to be really good.
But I think when you come in as an F2 champion, sort of you are rated. That's how I would look at it. I don't know, but I know what you mean.
Favorite commentary moment of all time?
You know what? I actually loved. Not mine. Crofty's through goes Hamilton at Silverstone. Like that's brilliant. That's brilliant. Or here comes Sebastian Vettel down the straight at Spa in the Ferrari. Like I have no bones about saying those. Crofty's had some amazing lines over the years, and those probably are two that stick out.
Radio or TV commentary? Which do you prefer?
I'm going to say radio, only because I do it more often.
I kind of thought you would say that because that's kind of your first love in a sense, almost.
It is. I love radio. I love radio. Like I want to, I just love all radio. So yeah, Let's go with that.
2 more to go. Second last one. Which race in Formula One history would you have loved to have commentated on?
Oh, well, did I answer this? I sort of kind of said, maybe I should say something older, but I sort of forget. So I'll go back with my 2012 Brazil answer as a race that I would like to have commentated.
Maybe we should get together and fund a Harry Benjamin documentary of the 2012 Formula One season.
Yeah.
And you can just go through all of them.
If you've not seen, honestly, I think it was either 6 or 7 of the first races were won by 6 or 7 different drivers. Like, that is incredible. I don't know how au fait you are with it, but there was a guy called Pastor Maldonado, Venezuelan driver, who raced for Williams. Hothead, brilliant driver, fast, but also terrible. He won a race. He beat Fernando Alonso. Like, it was incredible at the Spanish Grand Prix. Like, it was just the most mad season. Kamui Kobayashi, the Japanese driver, standing on the podium at the Japanese Grand Prix. Like, it was just cinematic. Like, it had everything as far as I'm concerned.
Final question. If I was to give you 5 of the Scottish pounds, not British, Scottish, to put on, who would be your 2026 Drivers' Champion for Formula One? Who are you putting on?
I am going to go for George Russell as my champion. I think it's tricky because I think Kimi will only get better, but I still think he'll be prone to some mistakes as a youngster, and that's where I think George will strike back hard.
We've actually, one of our previous guests just said, Antonelli, now that he's got that first win off his back, I think it's going to be closer than George really wants it to be. I think he's going to get a wee bit uncomfortable.
I think it will be. And you know what? I hope it is, because then we've got a great season on our hands. You know, if you just put all the regulation stuff to one side, we want a battle for the championship at the end of the day, don't we? We don't want anyone to walk away with it. So we kind of need the 2 Mercedes to be fighting at it. So hopefully it goes down to the wire.
Okay, so just to wrap up, Harry, where can the people that are listening to the podcast or watching any of the cuts find you on the socials?
You can find me. I'm Harry Benjamin on Instagram, TikTok, you name it. I'll probably be there.
Well, it's lovely to chat to you and get a wee insight into your kind of broadcasting history and the insights into commentating. All that's left for me to say is thanks very much for listening. My name's Coops. Thank you to Mairead.
Thanks, Coops. It was a great evening again.
Once again, yes. Annika, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And everybody, say goodbye. Cheers. Now, bye.
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 Bye.